And we are back discussing this very important topic. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. We are here with our panelists talking about what we can do as responsible adults here in Bermuda to ensure that our children are safe from abuse, any form of abuse or neglect. Let's get back to this topic. We've covered so much, and it's a lot to take in. And I'm feeling that now just as a moderator on the panel. Before the break, we talked about how to handle it if a child comes to you and discloses that they have been sexually abused. For most people, that's a mind blowing, the adults that, the child comes to, that's a mind blowing experience. Help us after we've acknowledged the child and started the process of dealing with that from a legal perspective, from a psychological perspective, for the child. What of the parents or the adult that had to hear that? What services are out there for them to just cope with hearing such a horrendous thing?
Yeah. At the Family Center, I know that we certainly create safe spaces for our families that have experienced some form of trauma as a result of abuse that they have heard about. And so when it comes to the parents have an opportunity to have their, an avenue to express the upsetness, the confusion, their feelings about the individual that has harmed their child, and their strong emotions that they may have surrounding in terms of what's next, what should they do about it. And so, we're there to help them to be able to express those feelings, to have some way of coping with the information and helping them to feel more grounded about the information they've heard, and support them surrounding in terms of, that they've done a good thing also with the fact that they created a space for their child to feel as though they could come to them. And so we acknowledge, to the parents, the fact that, that they've certainly done some really good things in that they have listened in the past and created an avenue for the child to want to come to them and share. Yeah.
When having these conversations with parents, I know of cases where people have a somewhat of a push pull. And what I mean by a push pull is that oftentimes the person who has abused a young person is a trusted, loved family member. It's a neighbor, someone that's very, very close who had access to your child. So part of you still loves that person and part of you hates that person. Is it normal to have those conflicting feelings in a situation like that?
It is. I mean, go ahead, Alicia. I would say that's very normal.
Oh yeah, it's very normal to have very conflicting emotions with somebody who's done something that you didn't expect, somebody that you put trust in, you thought would protect you no matter what, has actually done something the complete opposite. So it's normal to have those conflicting emotions, but at the end all be all is that the most important person to be focused on is the child, the victim.
I ask that question simply because oftentimes people will feel there might be something wrong with them if they don't 100% hate the individual who's responsible for this, or sometimes families, I've heard of cases where families have pressured parents and guardians to not press charges or to, think about the family image, think about the damage that it may potentially do to your child, et cetera. Do you want the public knowing what happened? Can you help us, guide us through that? If there is a parent in a situation and their child has been sexually abused and they're getting pressure from their loved ones to kind of diminish what has happened.
Yeah, well, the ramifications to the child are far exceed the damage that would be done to the perpetrator at the end. And we have a chance to help and rescue the child from further damage so that they can have a future where they feel safe to have healthy relationships by focusing on what the child needs in that time. And working through whether you come to therapy or you go to different agencies to get help with how to navigate your feelings and how to navigate the process of dealing with the hurt and the pain that you're going to experience from eliminating or at least dealing with the family member that has perpetrated on the child. It's just not easy. There is no easy way out of it. It's just going to be difficult. And that's just accepting the fact that this is just going to be difficult. But you're going to likely have much more regret if you protect the adult in the family rather than the child.
Yeah.
And the ramifications of the child and your relationship with that child can also be damaged if you don't do everything in your power to protect them.
The ramifications go out to the broader society as well, because oftentimes some of the maladaptive behaviors that we're seeing in the wider community can be traced back to some form of childhood abuse.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we have to remember, even the family member of the victim has been betrayed because they weren't who they said they were. It was very deception. I mean, that is deceptive to be showing this sign that you love and care about a child, and then you're using them for your own sexual pleasure. That's betrayal on every side. And that child's been betrayed and that family member's been betrayed. And for the child's perspective, we have to put those boundaries up. We have to put children first. That is what is so important. The relationship with the adult, that's a whole separate thing than it is with the relationship with the child, because we need to keep that child safe. Most offenders don't stop with one child. So this is an illness. And if we don't put our boundaries up, that child can continue being abused, or other children can start being abused if this isn't reported and investigated.
When you think about it, who needs more protection, the perpetrator or the victim? The child, right? Who needs more protection? Not the perpetrator. The child does.
Are we seeing changes, 11 years now that SCARS has been in existence, are we seeing changes in terms of people being more willing to report their family members, report their close friends who have engaged in these sort of horrendous activities?
Yeah, I think the best agencies to ask that question is Child and Family Services and the Bermuda, the police, and the DPP. I think reporting has increased, and that's a good thing. We've seen great changes. We know that through education, because that education's knowledge, we are empowering our children to speak, to give them a voice, to say that nobody should make you feel uncomfortable, not even grandpa, not even me as mom or dad. If anybody ever makes you feel uncomfortable in your body, you can come and tell us anything about anyone. You can even tell me if I make you feel uncomfortable, because this is your body, and you have a right to use your voice and say, no, I don't want you to do that. Before, I'm sure all of us have heard this, children were to be seen and not heard. We didn't allow children to speak up when they were feeling uncomfortable. And now we're saying you have a voice, and these are your private body parts, and nobody should view, touch, take pictures of, and you shouldn't do it to others. If we don't provide that information to these children at a young age, they may not even know when their behavior crosses the line, because nobody has provided them with those boundaries. They don't know. Sex feels good. It can be very confusing when you're a little one.
Yeah. That raises a question. Are there things that well-meaning parents are doing or saying to their children that might be inadvertently setting them up to be a potential victim? One of the things that comes to mind, there was, go hug your uncle, go, making forced children,
affection.
Forced affection, and stop being unsociable. You have to go, say hello. Children will often say, I don't want to speak to that person. I pull away from that person. And adults will make them deal with that person. Is that something that can inadvertently be setting children up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, Debi and her team at SCARS who deliver these trainings, they talk about this in terms of listening to children when they're saying, I don't want to hug everybody that you tell me to hug, et cetera. So we need to, one is teach appropriate boundaries, teach children that the power of their own voice and to be empowered, so that if it is part of your family customs to maybe give kisses on both cheeks or to give a hug or high fives and whatnot, but if a child knows, but when that's doesn't feel right to me and doesn't feel comfortable, I have a voice and it will be listened to. It will be respected. So it's not about saying to parents, all hands off, teach children to never, know how to socialize with others, and especially with the different cultural traditions that we have, but also understand, one, where wrong is wrong. There are very clear lines of where wrong is wrong in terms of inappropriate touching, grooming behaviors, teaching kids about keeping secrets, and things like that. So there are clear lines, and then where things may be a little bit like the hugs and whatnot, but if children know, I don't like to hug so-and-so, aunt so-and-so, or uncle so-and-so, and whatnot, that we all respect that. And you understand that boundary and you validate it and heed that.
What are some of the grooming behaviors that you mentioned that people might not even necessarily recognize as grooming behaviors?
Pushing for isolated one-on-one time. Sex offenders don't do this in front of other people. They're going to look for those isolated one-on-one situations. So somebody who's really pushing that isolated one-on-one, especially for people that work with children, watch out for tickling. Tickling is great, but I can't tell you how many stories, Sherrie, I've heard of the offender started with tickling. And then what they do is they test the child. Mm-hmm. If I move my hands to their private parts, let's see how they're going to respond. And if they're too afraid and they won't speak up, I know that I'm not going to get caught, or, they're going to allow me to keep doing this. And watching out for forced affection, watching out for saying inappropriate jokes in front of children, or always, risque sexual jokes in front of a young child, that's inappropriate. Watch out for the behaviors of the child. If the child seems uncomfortable, just pay attention. It may not be sexual abuse, but something may be happening where the child's feeling uncomfortable. Children are children. They should be, they're going to be joyful when they're around people who love and protect them. You can see that. But just pay attention to behaviors, I would say. And in our youth serving organizations, have policies that prevent anything from happening. That's the most important thing. If you work with children, make sure you have good, safe social media policies. Make sure you have safe transportation policies and travel policies and reporting policies. That reduces the risk.
You can also see also many times a preoccupation, whether it's on the perpetrator's stance or even the child. If there's a preoccupation with the child, this particular child, it can be a red flag. If there's even a preoccupation on the child's part with the perpetrator, that's also a red flag. So if there's any rewards that are promised, anything, those are more kind of external factors, but those are just kind of, and again, as Debi said, there's a lot of testing and manipulation going on the perpetrator's stance when it comes to kind of gauging whether this person is vulnerable enough to engage.
So that's why it's important then for parents to teach children to have a voice, to be, if they are feeling uncomfortable in a situation,
Correct.
To be able to say, no, don't touch me there. No, I don't feel comfortable with that person. And have a space where that voice will be respected.
Heard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I will tell.
Yes.
And the more that we tell children to use their voice, the more it actually is holding adults accountable to report it and to do something about it. So educating children very much on boundaries so that they do speak up, then whoever hears it typically now, I think, feels more compelled to do something about it, because you've got to do something.
And we do, of course, have mandated reporters here in Bermuda. We've had that for some time. But the bottom line is the vast majority of people in this country aren't mandated reporters. They're not in a position where they're a mandated reporter. So what do you say to people who say, well, I suspect something is going on, but then I don't have to by law because I don't fall into that.
Or somebody else will do it.
Yeah, or someone else will do it.
Well, actually, They are mandated by law because the Children's Act is very clear. If anyone knows of significant harm to a child, they must report it to the Director of Child and Family Services. That is in the law. So that makes us all mandated reporters and sexual abuse is significant harm. So it's not just the psychologist or the lawyer or the doctor, the teacher.
Not just professionals.
It's not just professionals. It is all of us. We are all mandated reporters in this country.
Yeah. And if I can just add to the Children's Act, there's also something we don't talk a lot about in this country, but we have Parental Responsibility Act. We as parents or guardians of children under the age of 18 actually have a duty to protect children. And this campaign, Because I Am a Child, speaks to that. Simply because children are children, they have a right to be protected by us. They have a right to be in safe spaces, to be loved, to be cared for. And we don't speak about that enough, but I would urge you, if you've never looked at the Parental Responsibility Act, it's under Bermuda laws, .com or .bm. But we do have an act that actually mandates in this country that as adults who have made decisions to have children, it is our duty to take care of them.
One of the things when people hear the phrase rights, children's rights, it conjures up loss of control in terms of the adults that, the children are going to be running everything. Can we just speak to that fear that a lot of adults have that if you give children any sort of voice or any sort of power, that means a loss of power for the adults in the situation?
I'm thinking about the fact that children are vulnerable and that as adults, I know that there may be a fear that children may want to lead in a way that may not necessarily be developmentally appropriate for them. But I think what's really important messaging for adults is that because the child is unable to speak up for themselves, it is our responsibility to ensure that we are allowing them to know that we care and we value them, and that their voice is important to us. And if they know that we are there and we're interested in them, then it will increase the likelihood that they will not only feel protected and safe, but we will also be able to have more healthier children because they know that we have empowered them.
Yeah.
Giving a child a voice doesn't mean that they run the show. It just means that they are heard and their feelings are validated, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will establish complete control over their environment. It just means we're allowing them the space to navigate how to express their feelings. It doesn't mean that that you can't set boundaries even though they have the voice.
But the one thing they have the right for, and you're right, I love exactly what you said, Susan and Alicia. The one thing they have a right to have is protection, love, nurturing. That's their right. And sometimes they don't receive that for whatever reason. But that is their right. They need to be loved unconditionally. They need to, for us to accept their imperfections because they are not perfect. Children are not. We know that. I remember being a child. I certainly wasn't perfect. But being loved no matter what. That is the message in this campaign, is because they are a child, they deserve to be protected. They deserve to be cared for. They deserve to be nurtured. They deserve to have two adults in their life or one adult in their life that will love them unconditionally, regardless of their imperfections, and never give up on them. Never. We are never to give up on a child, no matter what they go through. We are not to give up on them. We are to love them unconditionally. And I think this is where, even adults, when they go through from their childhood to their adulthood, if they didn't receive that, it's hard for them to pass that on because they don't know what that looks like. And we have to model that behavior. And if you're an adult and you're struggling with that, reach out for some help. Because if anything happened to you when you were little, it wasn't your fault. You did not cause that. But we want you to be, an adult in a child's life that can provide them what you didn't have. So it's just really important that that you get some help if you're an adult who didn't receive this as a child, or if an adult in your life didn't believe you or didn't protect you, didn't care for you and didn't nurture you and didn't love you unconditionally and gave up on you. That shouldn't have happened. That was not your fault. And I would encourage you as an adult to get some help on that so that your child can see what that looks like. That's what's important. That's their right as a child.
Absolutely. And there are a number of helping agencies here in Bermuda that people can reach out to. Can you let us know some of those agencies that if there is a concern about protecting a child from any form of abuse, who do parents and guardians and adults reach out to?
So we talked about Department of Child and Family Services as an agency that is there, and it is their mandate to ensure that they respond to any allegations or any concerns surrounding any form of abuse for a child. We also have agencies that are available to provide healing spaces for children and families after they have, it's been revealed that there has been some form of abuse. So we have Coalition for Protection of Children. We have, from a prevention perspective and advocacy and training, we have the SCARS, which we've spoken to. We have MASS for men. We also have the Family Center, which we spoke about. And we have other agencies such as Child and Adolescent Services for sort of psychiatric and mental health support also. There's a gamut of different Milestones, many other agencies that are have trained professionals to be able to support in the healing process.
Yeah, and private agencies. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Like Milestones Limited, where the agency that Alicia it represents, and Solstice, and there's a lot of private organizations. Also, the employers, EAP, they also help if you can get that through your company. So we have so many great resources in this country for healing.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a small island, we have
a lot of resources.
We really do. And you can find them online. You can probably even just ask a trusted friend or neighbor. In fact, many of the referrals that we get at Family Center are from family and friends. It's just someone has let someone else know that they trust that something is happening in their family or something's happening with their child. And then they actually say, hey, I heard that this helped someone else, or this place helped myself. So that's another part of it is reach out to someone that you trust so that you're not going through this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, we're all mandated by ethical standards to maintain privacy and confidentiality, regardless of how small the island is.
Yeah, that's so important. People do have that concern that because everyone knows everyone here in Bermuda, that there's a potential that information might spread to persons that you wouldn't want to necessarily know. But in that respect, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of people who have been through this, whether they were abused as children themselves or perhaps their child was abused by someone, the importance of them speaking out in order to break some of the shame that is often surrounding this issue. We'll be back in a moment.